And one question I've seen in a lot of different forms throughout a lot of the content we've had is, can I get into product operations from X role? So I've seen from project manager, from program manager, from operations, from product manager. So I'm going to kind of group all of those together and shape the question like this. Is there an ideal path? Or is it just kind of a mindset of what that product operations person should do and think about? And that path can be nonlinear from a variety of different previous roles.
Right. Do you want to kick off that, Tris?
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of either you've been a product manager before or you haven't, I think is a good distinction to make. I would say that the benefit of being a product manager is you know what a lot of the pain points probably are already, right? And so being able to dive in and try to focus in on solving those things is really valuable. And then I think the second thing is that it also builds a little bit of trust or confidence from the beginning that you will be there to solve the right problems. I think the key thing that ends up really being most important for this role is, I think, identification of who your customer is, right? Like if we take a lot of who, and I just wrote a piece about this with the Product-Led Alliance, but I think the real customer is a product manager, and as long as you're aligning around that, I think that you end up doing a lot of the right work. And so to me, that's most important. I think the part that I've seen, at least in the kind of myriad of product operations people that are out there, there's not a lot of standardization around the competencies that go into this. But I think that there is kind of this distinction between product operations people that are focused mostly on process orientation, and that's usually around like safety and certainty. And those people tend to come from kind of operations roles, customer support roles, things like that, I've found. And then people that tend to think about things as more like complex systems, they're more like the product managers that have been around for a while, or user researchers or something like that, right? So I think like there's a value to really embracing the uncertainty of how a complex organization works. And that's what you're doing when you're developing a community of practice. And so I think those types of skills either need to be learned or understood at a very early time. And so I think that's like a really important thing to go after, no matter what your background is. I would say this is a problem though for a lot of product managers, right? Like there are people that are essentially project managers doing a product manager's title a lot of the time, right? There are a lot of people that are there to not necessarily look at the uncertainty of the world or how you work in these complex situations. And so even product managers may not necessarily bring the things that are going to be required, like good facilitation skills, user research from the standpoint of complex organizations, organizational change, transformation, and then definitely like stakeholder and the idea of managing up. Like, I think a lot of the role ends up being that you're pushing back on managers, trying to turn the screws on product managers in some way, right? Like what you're trying to do is make sure that the product managers themselves are getting their bottlenecks removed or frictions reduced or something like that to get their job done. Your job, I don't think, is there to like make sure that managers are keeping a close eye on product managers.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. I always like to look at things. Well, obviously you have to, if you say who's the customer, that would be very interesting discussion. But let's take one step back. There are very, very many similar roles, I would almost imagine, right? If you think about it, even at a smaller level, you're working with the team, engineering team with product manager, there's a role called a scrum master. That could be just product manager themselves, could be a tech lead, could be a rotation role. So there's always a question, what is their job? Is their job just to make sure to protect the Scrum team? Is their job just to make sure that the Scrum team actually produce the product makes sense? So the other analogy I will use up is that there's a revenue ops, right? Think about it, product. You think about a product and go-to-market team, basically it's the two essence of the company. You build something, you sell something, right? So rev ops or in the past is a fraction of the role called the sales ops. So you could also ask that, so what is their role? Who is their customer? What is the purpose of that? Is the sales team their customer? Yes, part of it. But there are also other partners and customers of that role, right? Ultimately, sales teams are happy. We're not selling. We're not producing outcome. The company's not going to go anywhere. We're all going to get in trouble. So I think that the ops role always kind of, because the role is so connected to all functions, you have many, many customers, you have many, many stakeholders, and ultimately we'll decide to say, hey, what is the things that we need to solve immediately now? if things we want to solve immediate now, is the product team, product manager has the process and tooling and empowerment and the visibility and alignment to make decisions, for sure. But they're also part of the how product organization work with the rest of the organization. How about product team work with each other? So I think that the need really evolves depending on a company. It's very funny where, going back again, obviously PayPal is one of sort of my career journey, the biggest part versus all the other companies, even though a lot of the companies all went out from a small company to unicorn public company. But at PayPal, we went through a lot of things that sort of like early, the first time, where the first sort of the product ops executive, her title is the chief operations for product. So she is literally a COO for our product business. So when I think about our product operations, I really tend to think that at some level, you are a COO of the group you're in. So you have to think about all the elements needed, right? From your team to run your business, to your outcome of your organization, product, and others. So I think a product ops, their role is really, really broad. And obviously you don't do all the things all at once when you started. You really just say, what is the things need to be taken care of first, and then you expand your sphere of influence, and ultimately you expand not only just the outcome that an individual product ops person can produce, really the holistic product organization, right? That's really the ultimate goal, is to say, how do we build and enable a most effective, not effective is not efficient. Effective meaning we want to get to the place we need to get to, and then we're going there in a way as fast as possible by outcome and measurement and all that stuff. So long-winded answer, but it's definitely interesting to see companies evolve and needs evolve, and their role evolves as well.
I mean, I agree with you. I think the part that I worry about or I caution against is this idea that there's not going to be some emergent behavior that comes out of your organization, right? Like I think when we talk about what a COO does, I think in my mind, at least when I think about a COO, it's that they have this understanding of every little thing that's going on inside of their operation, and that they're able to control it and change it in some way. When the reality is like, the reason why we want to have teams that are empowered, and
right.
All these things, like they have a lot of agency around what they're building, is that there's just going to be some things that we don't specify, right? And this is something I keep on trying to beat the drum about when it comes to product operations, is that there are going to be some things where there's not a problem about that, and so you should just let product managers figure out how they actually deal with things together. And
I totally
think that communication.
No,
yeah,
I totally agree with you. Right, you're not the ones giving that people something to follow, but instead you provide sort of you help the team, you orchestrate the team, but not like micromanage. Right. It's not you pulling the strings, right? Even for COOs, there's CEO has to say, here's the direct direction. We need to align our strategy, and then you can go execute, right? It's not possible for COO really get into line of every business. That's just not even humanly possible. But I totally agree with you. There is a spectrum of how much you think, how much there's a desire to be consistent, how much a desire to be aligned, versus how much nothing is sort of like 100% perfect, right? So we need to know this is where we're gonna go, right? And that, at least we need to have the North Star. Here's where we want to go. We can't just say let's go. So that's but I kind of agree with you. This is really hard for operations roles to say how much consistency and alignment the organization need at this time, and evolves, right? So I think that that's where, going back to your question, Baji, you asked like, what kind of background? It's best for our product operations. I would say, people would be having both the big. Primarily, I think if you have a way to understand bigger picture and be able to work with the team, these are some of the more essential skills you need. Now, that could coming from product, could coming from program, could coming from operations, could coming from other roles, just like a COO coming a lot of backgrounds. But ultimately, there's some skills and trade associated with it, which is you have to have a bigger picture understanding. You have to be able to work cross-functionally. You have to be able to influence without manage, right? So these are the trades that comes with a successful product operations, I think.
Yeah, and one thing I would just add to that too is that the concepts around like developing or keeping a community active and alive, I think is a really, really important aspect of this. And that's why I tend to say that I'm a steward of a community rather than that I'm the product ops person for a community, is because I'm there to cultivate this like interactions between other people so that there can be something that is bigger than anything I could plan. I'm there more to set up the right types of amplification to be able to get people to then do things that are better for themselves as well. So I think that's like all this discussion about like how do you build communities, not only, there's a lot of discussion about this today, but I think like looking at the way that those people think about building communities with external users, I think can be applied an awful lot. And there's a lot of people that have thought about this idea of community of practice as kind of a terminology. And so I think those are both things that we can learn from as a product ops person. And you'll either learn it on the job, or if you bring it to the job, you'll be more successful, I think.
Right. Yeah, I think that, it seems to me, Chris, you have a very strong emphasis on sort of the community, like the leader of the product management community in your company. I think it's probably, especially in your current role, you shared earlier, you have, I don't know, hundreds of PMs where it's only you as the product ops. Therefore, your charter is a little bit different, right? In some of the smaller companies, let's say I have 20 PMs have product operations. That is a very, very different focus and need. And in many cases where companies, especially growing very fast, they start to have, from a 1 PM go double and quadruple, and all of a sudden you have a bunch of them, how we should work together, how should we plan, what are our dependencies, where are we going, are we stepping on each other's, we are just a deadlock because we can't move anything because I have my roadmap, you have your roadmap. That's just a very, very different focus. And I think that, understanding where the needs are, to your point, Chris, product manager is a key customer of the product operations. So when you have a large community, mostly self-sufficient, they are independently operating, there's a one mode of operating and a focus. But you have, say, you have 5, 10, 20 product managers, they are stepping on each other all the time because it's growing so fast, there's no clear understanding who does what, there's, so then you have a slightly different way, not mandate, but you do work with them to say, hey, we have this challenge. How do we solve this challenge, right? So in the past, it will be maybe the VP product has to kind of step in to solve this problem. But then, in many cases, it's the role split, right? You have a product leader with split so that you have a product ops person be the right-hand person to help scale the organization, make sure the team gets what they need, get the training and tooling and resources and all that stuff, including processes, so that the team can work well and not get burned out, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree with that.